My parents hid Grandpa's will and gave my sister his house. So, I took legal action and cut ties. I'm 32 male, and I've always been the kind of person who works hard for what I have. Growing up in a middle-class family, in a modest suburban neighborhood, I watched my parents struggle to make ends meet, but the way they handled those struggles always seemed to differ between my sister Elle and me. From an early age, I understood the value of money and hard work, while Elle took a more carefree approach to life. Our parents' response to these different attitudes would set the stage for years of unequal treatment that would eventually come to a head over our grandfather's inheritance. About a year ago, my grandfather passed away. He was the family patriarch, and while we weren't particularly close, I had always respected him. He owned several properties, including an old house in a historic part of town that had been in the family for generations. This house wasn't just any property. It was a piece of our family's history, and my grandfather had always said it would be divided between Elle and me. A few weeks after the funeral, my parents called me over to discuss the inheritance. The conversation started casually enough, but I could sense something was off in their tone. That's when they dropped the bombshell. They had decided to give the entire house to Elle. "We think it's best," my father said, his voice firm but avoiding eye contact. "Elle's the one who's really settled here, and we thought it would be better for her." I was stunned. "What about what Grandpa wanted?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger building inside me. "He always said it would be split between us. He told me himself, multiple times." "We've decided," my mother said firmly, using the same tone she'd used throughout our childhood when favoring Elle. "We think it's best for the family." The following months were difficult. I had to watch as Elle moved into the house, making plans and renovations without any consideration for its historical value or family significance. She treated it like a new toy, talking about modern updates that would strip away its character. She planned to paint over the original woodwork, replace the historic windows with vinyl, and convert the carriage house into a home gym. Every time I saw her, she acted as though nothing had changed, as though the property had always been hers to take. Elle always got what she wanted. I learned early on how differently my parents treated us. I remember when I was 12, I wanted a new bike. My parents told me I needed to earn it by doing extra chores and maintaining good grades. For 3 months, I woke up early to help with housework, mowed lawns in the neighborhood, and studied hard to keep my A's. When Elle wanted a bike 2 years later, they simply bought it for her birthday, no conditions attached. "Your sister's different," they'd say. "She needs more encouragement." This pattern continued throughout our teenage years. While I worked part-time jobs to save for college, Elle was given spending money because she needed to focus on her social development. When I got my first car at 17, it was a used Honda that I'd saved up for myself. Elle got a new Toyota for her 16th birthday because our parents worried about her safety. Every time I pointed out these disparities, I was told I was being petty, or that I should be proud of being the responsible one. The inequity extended beyond material things. When I wanted to attend a college 3 states away, my parents discouraged it, saying it was too expensive and impractical. They suggested I attend the local state university to save money. But when Elle chose an expensive private college across the country, they supported her decision entirely, even taking out additional loans to fund her education. "Your sister needs the experience," they explained. "You're already so independent." I worked through college, maintaining a full course load while holding down a part-time job. Elle changed majors 3 times, took 6 years to graduate, and never worked a day during her studies. Our parents covered all her living expenses, while I lived frugally in a cramped apartment with roommates to make ends meet. After graduation, I started my own business from scratch. Every penny I earned went back into growing the company. I worked 16-hour days, sacrificed weekends, and lived on a tight budget to make it succeed. Elle, meanwhile, jumped from job to job, always with our parents' financial safety net beneath her. When she couldn't make rent, they covered it. When she maxed out her credit cards, they paid them off. "She's still finding herself," they'd say. "You've always been so good with money." Then came the final betrayal. My parents called asking me to help Elle financially because she and her husband were struggling with their business. The same sister who had just received my share of the inheritance was now asking for more handouts. The same parents who had given her everything were now expecting me to bail her out. "You've been doing so well with your business," my father said, his voice carefully casual. "Elle and James are having some cash flow issues. We thought maybe you could help them out with a loan." The audacity of the request stunned me. After years of favoritism, they still expected me to step in and fix Elle's problems. But the true extent of their manipulation came to light when I discovered an email chain between my parents and Elle, discussing plans to sell the house and split the profits, all without my knowledge or consent. They had not only taken my inheritance, but were now planning to profit from it, while still asking me for financial help. The discovery of my grandfather's actual will, which clearly stated an equal division of the property, was the final straw. Years of unequal treatment, favoritism, and manipulation culminated in this moment of complete betrayal. I realized that nothing would change unless I took action. I contacted a lawyer and filed for a temporary injunction to halt any sale of the property. The legal battle that followed was long and difficult, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my life, I wasn't accepting their decisions quietly, or playing the role of the responsible one who would understand and forgive. My parents were furious when they learned of my legal action. "How could you do this to your sister?" they demanded, as though years of favoritism and inequality hadn't led to this moment. My mother even tried to guilt-trip me by bringing up all the times I'd been strong for the family, suggesting that this was just another opportunity to show my maturity by letting Elle have her way. The legal proceedings lasted months, with Elle and my parents trying every emotional manipulation tactic they could think of. They brought up childhood memories, reminded me of family obligations, and even tried to paint me as the villain who was hurting his struggling sister out of spite. But for once, I stood firm. Eventually, I secured my rightful share of the property. It was a bittersweet victory. While I had finally stood up for myself and won, it had cost me my relationship with my family. But perhaps that relationship had never been what I thought it was in the first place. I sold my share of the property and invested the proceeds into my business. Elle and my parents were angry, claiming I had betrayed the family by not letting her buy my share at a discount, but I no longer cared about their approval. Years of unequal treatment had taught me that I would never receive it anyway. A year later, my mother called with what seemed like an apology. "I know things have been difficult," she said, her voice carrying the weight of regret. But it was too late. The pattern of favoritism and inequality had been set too deep, for too long. Even in her attempt at reconciliation, she couldn't help but mention how hard everything had been on Elle. I've learned that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own families, and that standing up for yourself doesn't make you the villain, even if your family tries to paint you as one. The unequal treatment I experienced throughout my life taught me valuable lessons about self-worth and the importance of setting boundaries, even with those closest to you. Today, I run a successful business and have found peace in the distance I maintain from my family. Elle continues to rely on our parents, and they continue to enable her, but I'm no longer part of that dynamic. I've learned that true family supports each member equally, and sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the one you're born into. The experience has taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand equal treatment, and to break free from toxic family dynamics. While the road to this realization was long and painful, it led me to a place of strength and independence that I never would have found had I continued to accept their unequal treatment. Looking back now, I can see how each instance of favoritism, each unequal decision, each moment of enabling Elle while demanding more from me, built up to this final confrontation. The inheritance battle wasn't really about the house. It was about years of inequality, favoritism, and manipulation finally coming to a head. Sometimes it takes a major event like this to see the true nature of your family relationships, and to find the courage to change them. The hardest part wasn't taking legal action, or even selling my share of the property. The hardest part was accepting that my parents would never see their treatment of us as unfair. In their minds, they were always just helping Elle because she needed it more, never realizing how their actions affected me or our relationship as a family. But in the end, I'm grateful for the clarity this situation brought me. It helped me break free from a toxic pattern that had dominated my life for too long. While I may have lost my family in the traditional sense, I gained something more valuable: self-respect and the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. My parents planned to leave everything to my disabled brother, so I cut them out of my life. My brother, now 32, has always struggled to find his footing in life. I'll be blunt, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He struggled through school, never went to college, and floundered out of not one, but two trade schools. Welding and mechanics weren't his calling, apparently. Now, he works at a gas station and seems content enough, but I can't help but feel a twinge of resentment every time I think about how differently our parents treat us. I'm 24, their younger child, and I've always been the one to figure things out on my own. Our parents always preached independence and earning your own way, refusing to pay for college or even pitch in for big life events. I took that to heart. I joined the military at 17, earned an associate degree while serving, and used my GI Bill to pay for my bachelor's. Now I'm working on my master's degree, and my wife and I have already bought a house and built a stable life for ourselves. But my brother, he got a different deal entirely. Our parents, who were so adamant about not giving handouts, somehow found it in their hearts to fully fund his attempts at trade school. Not once, but twice. They've handed him cash to cover late rent, and loaned him money more times than I can count. To them, it seems he's just a late bloomer. To me, he's cosplaying as an adult while they enable him at every turn. What stings the most isn't the money itself. I never expected financial help. It's the blatant disparity in how they've treated us. My achievements, my hard work, were met with a pat on the back and a "good job, kid," while my brother's failures are met with open wallets and endless patience. And now, with our parents in their 60s and their health deteriorating, they've made it clear how they plan to handle their legacy. They recently told us they're leaving almost everything to my brother in their will. Their reasoning: he needs their support, even after they're gone. Meanwhile, they want me to be their medical power of attorney and manage their estate when the time comes. When they told me this, something inside me snapped. I told them to give my brother everything. The inheritance, the responsibilities, all of it. I'm done. They called me heartless, told me to have some grace, and reminded me that my brother isn't as capable as I am. I couldn't believe their audacity. They raised me to fend for myself, and now they expect me to pick up the pieces they're leaving behind for someone who's never been held accountable for anything. No, thank you. This morning, my mother had a doctor's appointment and asked me for a ride since she can't drive herself anymore. My response was simple: ask your favorite child or call an Uber. I know it was harsh, but I'm tired of being the one who's expected to give while getting nothing in return. The tension in the family has been thick enough to cut with a knife. Amidst all the chaos, my brother called me, his voice uncharacteristically soft, almost hesitant. "I'm sorry," he said, and I could hear the weight of guilt he was carrying. "Please, don't be mad at me." I sighed, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm not mad at you," I told him firmly. "This isn't your fault. You didn't create this situation. Our parents did." I paused, wanting to make sure he understood. "I'm angry at them for treating us so differently, for always putting you first while expecting me to fend for myself. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you." He was quiet on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But he didn't. Instead, he just muttered a quiet, "Thank you," before the call ended. As much as I wanted to be furious at someone, I couldn't place that blame on him. My anger wasn't with my brother. It was with the system of favoritism that had always stacked the odds against me. My brother isn't disabled. He's just limited. His IQ hovers just above 80. High enough to disqualify him from benefits where we live, but low enough that he's always struggled to keep up. From a young age, my parents coddled him. They treated him like he was fragile, quick to shield him from anything that might bruise his self-esteem. If something seemed hard, he'd give up, and they'd let him. But the thing is, he's capable. He holds down a job, pays most of his bills, drives, and shares an apartment with a roommate. He's not helpless, just enabled. My parents, however, never extended that grace to me. When my wife and I got married, I didn't expect them to pay for the wedding, but showing up empty-handed, that was a slap in the face. I've been to plenty of weddings, and I would never show up without a gift. It's just rude. What made it worse was that my in-laws covered the entire wedding, which turned my parents' stinginess into a major talking point among the guests. It was humiliating, and I'll never forget the embarrassment of having to explain why my own parents didn't contribute a dime. I recently sat down with my parents, determined to have a real conversation about the blatant disparity in how they've treated us. I laid it all out. How they constantly emphasized that I had to support myself as an adult. How I joined the military at 17 because I knew they'd push me out at 18. How they never offered support beyond the bare minimum of raising me as a child. They didn't help with college, didn't buy my wife and me a wedding gift, didn't offer anything. Meanwhile, they brag about having over $1 million in savings, built from nothing. And yet, for my brother, they've always opened their wallets. 2 rounds of trade school he failed out of, money to start a business that never got off the ground, countless bailouts for late rent. It's not even about the money for me. It's about the clear message they cared more for him. They showed their love through actions, and those actions didn't extend to me. As I tried to explain all this, they interrupted me at every turn, brushing off my feelings like they didn't matter. They told me I wasn't entitled to a dime of their inheritance, that I'm an adult and should be able to handle myself. Their complete lack of understanding or empathy was staggering. They flipped the script, accusing me of being wrong for not helping my mother with her doctor appointments, or offering to take care of her. The thing is, I don't hate my brother. He's not a terrible guy. He just makes bad choices sometimes. But at the end of the day, he's still my older brother, and he tries to be good to me. I couldn't cut him off without a good reason, and this isn't his fault. He didn't ask to be put on a pedestal by our parents. My anger isn't with him. It's with the dynamic they've created, one that's left me feeling like an afterthought my entire life. Eventually, I realized there was no point in trying to get through to them. They didn't care about my feelings. So I told them the truth. I'm done. I told them to remove me entirely from their will. I won't be their estate executor, their medical power of attorney, or anything else. I don't want their money. They should spend it all on top-tier nursing homes and hire someone else to handle their estate because I'm done. My mother's jaw dropped. "Would you really put your own parents in a nursing home?" she asked, her voice shaking. I stared back at her and said, "Would you really let your 17-year-old daughter join the military, knowing she'd be harassed by older men, just to avoid going into debt for school?" That hit them hard. They yelled, they cried, but I didn't stick around. I walked out, leaving behind years of frustration and unmet expectations. Walking out of that house felt like shedding a weight I'd been carrying my entire life. I felt relief, a kind of freedom I hadn't realized I needed. I have a wife who loves me, a stable home, and a promising future. Soon, I'll start my master's degree, and we're even thinking about having a baby. As for my parents, they can figure out their own lives, just as I had to figure out mine. Sometimes, the people who should love us the most are the ones who wound us the deepest. Letting go of them isn't easy, but it's often the only way to protect your peace. We can't rewrite the past, but we can decide how much of it we carry into the future. For me, the choice is clear. I'm moving on. This journey has taught me a lesson I'll hold on to forever. I have the right to prioritize my well-being, to say no when things aren't fair, and to demand the same respect I give to others. Family should never mean accepting inequality or feeling like less. If it does, the best thing you can do is step back and reclaim your life. I'm moving forward now, focused on my wife, our dreams, and the future we're building together. Letting go of the hurt hasn't been easy, but it's been the right choice. I deserve love and respect, not just from others, but from myself too. That's the lesson I'm carrying with me, and it's one I'll never let go of again.
My parents invited everybody, excluding my son, to a family Christmas party, so I ended up everything right away. I'm 34 and never imagined I'd be widowed. But here I am, trying to get my 7-year-old through his morning routine while fighting back tears that still come 8 months after losing Mark. The accident at the construction site happened so suddenly. One minute I was planning dinner, the next I was getting a call that changed our lives forever. Those first few months were a blur of paperwork, funeral arrangements, and sleepless nights spent holding Tommy as he cried for his dad. If it weren't for my in-laws, I honestly don't know how we would have made it. They've been absolute angels, picking Tommy up from school every day so I can focus on putting our lives back together. Every time I stop by their house after work, my mother-in-law tries to slip an envelope of money into my purse. Every time I push it back. "Dakota, sweetie, we want to help," she always says. "We know the insurance company paid well, but your family, let us do this." She's right about the insurance. The company paid out $300,000 after Mark's death. Between that and my job as a marketing manager, we're doing okay financially. But with my in-laws, it's never been about money. It's about the love they show us every single day. I wish I could say the same about my own parents. Mom and Dad have always made it crystal clear that my older sister Rachel was their golden child. Now they extend that same favoritism to her kids over Tommy. Last weekend was a perfect example. Tommy was excited to see his grandparents, bouncing around asking questions about everything, just being his curious 7-year-old self. "Why does the clock make that sound?" he asked, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. "How does it work inside?" Mom sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Dakota, can't you control him? He's always asking questions about everything." "Rachel's kids never give us this much trouble," Dad muttered, retreating behind his laptop screen. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. Of course, Rachel's 3 kids were perfect in their eyes, even though they barely looked up from their phones. Meanwhile, my bright, curious Tommy was being criticized for simply wanting to learn about the world around him. It was just another chapter in a lifetime of being the less favored child. I'd learned to bite my tongue years ago, but watching them treat Tommy the same way still stung. At least they helped occasionally with childcare, watching him when I had late meetings or picking him up if both my in-laws were busy, though I couldn't shake the feeling they were doing it out of obligation rather than love. Then came that Tuesday dinner that changed everything. I should have known something was up when Mom made my favorite dish. Dad was unusually chatty, asking about work, about Tommy, about everything. They were building up to something, but I couldn't guess what. "So, Dakota," Mom said carefully, "we've been meaning to ask you something. How much was Mark's life insurance payout?" The question hit me like a slap. I nearly choked on my water, completely blindsided by such a direct inquiry about something so personal. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe I was just tired of keeping secrets from them, but I answered honestly. "About $300,000, I said quietly. The room fell silent. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might hurt himself. They stared at me like I'd just announced I'd won the lottery. "Well," Mom said, putting down her fork deliberately, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. "I've invested it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's for Tommy's future, his college education, maybe help him buy an apartment when he's older." That was always the plan Mark and I had discussed, but Dad waved his hand dismissively. "That's years away, Dakota. You should be thinking about the present, about your family." The way he said family made it clear he wasn't talking about Tommy. It was that same tone they always used when helping Rachel with her house down payment or funding her lavish wedding. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even happen." "I'm not discussing my money anymore," I cut her off, my voice sharper than intended. The silence that followed was deafening. They both sat back, Dad's face clouding over with that familiar disappointment I'd seen so many times growing up. Mom pressed her lips into that thin line that always meant trouble. I thought that would be the end of it. I expected their usual month-long silent treatment, their go-to response when I didn't meet their expectations. But to my surprise, Mom called just a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she announced, her voice warm as if nothing had happened. "Rachel and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I agreed. When I arrived that Sunday, Rachel was already there with her 3 kids, all glued to their phones as usual. We sat down to eat, and Rachel started talking about rising prices, bills piling up, and how hard it was to make ends meet these days. That's when the trap sprung. "I've been thinking," Rachel announced, looking around the table with that same self-righteous expression she'd worn since we were kids. "Dakota and I should help Mom and Dad financially." She paused for effect before continuing. "I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is. Jack's the only one working, and with 3 kids." She trailed off, letting that sink in before turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But you, Dakota, you should send them $1,000 monthly." I nearly choked again. "What?" "Well, it makes sense," Rachel pressed on. "You earn really well at your job and you only have 1 child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." My blood boiled at her careful avoidance of mentioning Mark's death directly. I wanted to scream that I was a widow, that I didn't have a husband's income to rely on anymore. But Mom was already clapping her hands in delight, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, girls," Mom exclaimed, "you don't know what this means to us." I sat there, torn between anger and disbelief, watching my family's expectant faces. The words of refusal died in my throat. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and here they were, putting a price tag on it. "Fine," I heard myself say, "I'll do it." The first transfer hurt the most, $1,000 gone with a few clicks. I told myself it was worth it if it meant more family support with Tommy, but that fantasy quickly unraveled. Every time I needed help with Tommy, there was an excuse. "Mom, could you pick Tommy up from school today? Sarah has a doctor's appointment and I have a late meeting." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom's voice would crackle through the phone. "I've got such a headache today, you know how my migraines get." This became a pattern. Mom was too busy, she was tired, she had errands to run, her back was acting up. Meanwhile, the $1,000 left my account like clockwork every month. Then came the Christmas betrayal. It was a week before Christmas when Mom called. "Dakota, honey," she started, using that syrupy sweet tone that always preceded bad news. "About Christmas Eve, we've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party, no children allowed." The pencil I was holding snapped in my hand. "What?" "It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year," Mom continued, as if she was discussing something as trivial as changing dinner plans. "You know, wine, adult conversation." "But it's Christmas," I protested, moving away so Tommy couldn't hear. "What am I supposed to do with Tommy?" "Oh, that's easy," she replied, her voice light and dismissive. "You can leave him with your in-laws, they'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7. After hanging up, I stared at Tommy, who was still working on his math problems, completely unaware that his grandmother had just uninvited him from Christmas. My heart ached, watching him concentrate on his multiplication tables, his tongue sticking out just like Mark's used to. I decided to compromise. I'd leave Tommy with my in-laws for a few hours, make an appearance at my parents' house to exchange gifts and greetings, then head back to celebrate properly with my in-laws and son. But when I arrived at my parents' house that Christmas Eve, my world tilted on its axis. The house was packed with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, and their children. Rachel's 3 kids were running through the living room wearing paper crowns. This wasn't an adults-only party at all. It was a party where only my son wasn't welcome. More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Tommy? Why had I come alone? Each inquiry felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Through the crowd, I spotted my mother in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a Christmas-themed platter as if everything was perfectly normal, as if she hadn't just excluded her only grandson from a family celebration. "Mom," I said, my voice low and controlled, "can we talk?" The confrontation that followed changed everything. "So why are Rachel's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom straightened her Christmas sweater, not meeting my eyes. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" "Those children," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I stared at her in disbelief. "Well-mannered? Tommy is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior constantly, my in-laws always say." "Oh," Mom interrupted, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him, encourage all those endless questions. The other children, they deserve to be here more, they know their place." As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the dining room. Rachel's youngest son, Kevin, had grabbed a handful of deviled eggs and was throwing them at his sister. The eggs sailed across the room, splattering against Emily's new Christmas dress as she shrieked. I turned back to my mother, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I can clearly see their superior manners on display." That's when I decided to expose everything. I cleared my throat loudly, cutting through the holiday music and chatter. All eyes turned to me. "Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "Why Tommy isn't here celebrating Christmas with his family." I told them everything about the adults-only lie, about the monthly payments, about Rachel's fake contribution. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and angry outbursts. Rachel's husband Jack was livid. "You're sending your parents money every month from where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is." Rachel's composure cracked. "I never actually sent any money," she stammered. "Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Dakota would agree to help them financially." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched comprehension dawn on my relatives' faces as they pieced together what had happened, how my parents and sister had manipulated me into supporting them while simultaneously excluding my child from family events. I raised my hand, silencing the ongoing arguments. "I have something else to say." The room fell quiet again. "From this moment on," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I will no longer be sending you any money, and I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Rachel. I'm done." I walked out, leaving the bag of gifts by the door. The sound of it closing behind me felt final, like the ending of a chapter that should have been finished long ago. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With a few quick taps, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like cutting off a chain I'd been dragging behind me for months. The drive to my in-laws' house seemed to take both forever and no time at all. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve with them. This, I realized, was what family should feel like. The aftermath was swift and complete. My aunt called the next morning to tell me how the evening had ended, how relatives had left en masse, not even bothering to say goodbye to my parents. Jack had packed up his kids and taken them to his parents' house, telling Rachel he needed time to think about their marriage. My phone buzzed with messages from Mom, Dad, and Rachel, all variations of "we're sorry" and "please talk to us and we can explain." I read each message once, then archived them without responding. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed peacefully. Tommy and I spent quiet evenings with my in-laws, played board games, watched holiday movies, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of being with people who truly loved us both. When my parents showed up on New Year's Eve with an expensive gift for Tommy, trying to buy their way back into our lives, I finally said what I should have said years ago. Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong, or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and won't speak to you anymore? Their exchanged glance told me everything I needed to know. I think you should leave, I said quietly. I don't believe you and I don't trust you, not anymore. But we're family, Mom protested, tears welling up in her eyes. No, I shook my head. Family doesn't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did, that's not family. I watched my son bloom under the attention and love of family members who actually wanted to know him, not change him. He started calling my in-laws grandma and grandpa exclusively now, and they continued to be our rocks, our safe harbor in any storm. Sometimes I still think about that Christmas Eve, about the moment I finally stood up to my parents. It wasn't just about the money or even about Tommy's exclusion. It was about recognizing that a real family isn't determined by blood but by love, respect, and acceptance.
My parents humiliated me at my brother's wedding, so I served them the perfect revenge. I'm 32. I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come from that humble food truck parked on campus corners. The gleaming stainless steel surfaces and precise movements of my team were a far cry from those early days of struggling to keep the generator running and praying the ancient refrigeration unit wouldn't fail. "Chef, the Meyer wedding tasting is in 20 minutes, called out Maria, my assistant manager of 5 years. "Thanks. I'll be right there," I replied, adjusting my chef's coat. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders: 50 employees, countless events, and a reputation that had taken a decade to build. That reputation would soon be tested in ways I never imagined, all because of a wedding invitation that arrived on my desk one spring morning. "Your brother's getting married," Maria said, handing me the elegant cream envelope. Her tone was careful. She knew my family history all too well. I stared at Mark's name in gold lettering, remembering the gap that had grown between us since our mother's death. The handwritten note inside brought back a flood of memories. "Hey sis, I know it's been a while, but I miss you. I'm getting married and it wouldn't feel right without you there. Maybe it's time we tried to fix things." Love, Mark. The words transported me back to that terrible year when everything changed. I was 14, Mark just 10, when Mom died. The house felt empty without her laugh, her warmth, her presence. Then my stepmother, Jenny, arrived, and with her came the systematic erasure of everything that remained of our mother. I remember standing in the hallway, watching Jenny take down Mom's favorite painting, a watercolor of the lake where we used to spend our summers. Mom had bought it from a local artist, and I could still remember her joy when she found the perfect spot for it. "This doesn't match the new decor," Jenny had said dismissively, not even bothering to handle it carefully as she removed it from the wall. "But Mom loved that painting," I protested, my voice catching. "She always said it reminded her of our family vacations." Jenny's response was cold, her eyes narrowing as she turned to face me. "Well, she's not here anymore, is she? Things change. You need to accept that. Your father and I are trying to make a fresh start, and you're making it more difficult than it needs to be." Dad, desperate to move forward, backed her at every turn. I can still see him standing in the doorway, shoulders slumped, avoiding my pleading gaze. "Jenny's trying to make this a home again," he'd say, his voice tired and distant. "Can't you try to help instead of fighting everything?" But I couldn't help fighting. Every photo removed, every memory erased felt like losing Mom all over again. Mark adapted, found comfort in Jenny's attention, but I remained the outsider, the reminder of what they wanted to forget. I watched as my little brother gradually shifted allegiance, drawn in by Jenny's promises of a normal family life. The changes came rapidly after that. Mom's garden, which she'd tenderly maintained even during her illness, was ripped out for a modern landscape design. Her recipe books, filled with handwritten notes and family secrets, disappeared during a kitchen reorganization. Each loss felt like a physical blow. College brought its own battles, marking the final fracture in our family dynamics. I can still hear the arguments about money echoing through our house. "Dad, I just need help with the first semester's tuition," I'd pleaded, standing in his home office with acceptance letters and financial aid forms spread across his desk. "I've already lined up 2 part-time jobs for the rest of it." He barely looked up from his computer. "You need to learn responsibility," he'd replied, while writing another check for Mark's private university. "Your brother takes his education seriously. He has a plan, goals. What do you have? Vague ideas about cooking?" Those words stung, but they also fueled me. The food truck wasn't just a business. It was my declaration of independence. Starting with borrowed equipment and recipes learned at Mom's side, I built something of my own. Those first few months were brutal. I'd work my other jobs during the day, then spend evenings and nights serving comfort food to hungry students. Every penny went back into the business. I remember the first time I catered a real event, a professor's retirement party. My hands shook as I prepared the appetizers in my tiny food truck kitchen, but the feedback was overwhelming positive. That success led to more bookings, and slowly, my reputation grew. Jenny's disdain was relentless throughout this period. At every family gathering she could convince me to attend, she'd find ways to diminish my achievements. "Still playing with your little food truck?" she'd say, swirling her wine glass while holding court in her perfectly decorated living room. "Mark's getting his MBA, you know. A real career. Though I suppose someone has to feed all those students." Her friends would titter politely, while I swallowed my anger and reminded myself that success would be the best revenge. 6 years ago, everything came to a head. I'd been at a catering event when my phone buzzed with a text from our old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Did you know they're selling the house? There's a dumpster in the driveway. I think they're throwing out a lot of your mom's things." I drove there immediately, breaking every speed limit, only to find a sold sign on the lawn and a dumpster filled with the last traces of Mom's life, photos, letters, the quilt she'd made during her final months. Gone. I stood there in the drizzling rain, digging through the debris, trying to salvage anything I could. The confrontation with Dad was brutal. "How could you do this without telling me?" I demanded, voice shaking, holding Mom's water-damaged recipe book. These were her things. Our memories. "You didn't even give me a chance to keep them." "It's just stuff," he'd replied, Jenny nodding beside him like a well-trained puppet. "You need to move on. We all have. Why can't you?" That was the last time I spoke to them, until Mark's wedding invitation arrived. Maria watched me reading the note, concern etched on her face. "Are you going to go?" I folded the invitation carefully, running my fingers along the creases. "Yes. And I'm going to offer to cater it." "Are you sure that's wise?" she asked, leaning against my desk. "After everything they've done?" "Probably not," I admitted, thinking of all the potential ways it could go wrong. "But he's my brother. And maybe it's time to try building bridges instead of burning them." The offer was declined politely, but firmly. "We've already booked someone," Mark explained over the phone, his voice apologetic but firm. "But I'm really glad you're coming. It means a lot to me." The wedding venue was stunning, a historic mansion in Lake Forest, all marble and gilt. Walking up the sweeping driveway, I felt underdressed despite my carefully chosen outfit. Mark's face lit up when he saw me at the ceremony. "You came?" he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt both familiar and strange. "I wasn't sure you would." The moment was short-lived. Jenny appeared, designer dress rustling, eyes sharp as she assessed me. "Oh, you actually showed up," she said, looking me up and down with calculated disdain. "I'm surprised you could afford something appropriate to wear. Though I suppose your little business must be doing well enough to manage at least that." I forced a smile, determined not to let her ruin this attempt at reconciliation. "Hello, Jenny. The venue is beautiful. You and Mark's fiancé did a wonderful job with the planning." The seating arrangement spoke volumes. I was tucked away at a distant table with cousins I barely recognized. One of them, Amy, who I vaguely remembered from childhood summers, leaned over during the salad course. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, glancing at the family table where Jenny held court. "You should be up there with them. You're his sister." I shrugged, trying to maintain dignity. "It's fine. I'm just here for Mark." But it wasn't fine. Dad, several drinks in, made sure of that. He stumbled to our table during the reception, face flushed with alcohol and anger. "Who invited you?" he slurred, pointing an unsteady finger. "Always trying to ruin everything. Showing up where you're not wanted, making people uncomfortable." "I have an invitation," I said quietly, conscious of the stares around us. I pulled it from my clutch, but he batted it away. "A mistake," Jenny chimed in, appearing at his side like a malevolent shadow. "Though I suppose you needed a break from your little kitchen experiments. How is the food truck business? Still serving hot dogs to drunk college students?" The deliberate ignorance of my success was the final straw. I stood, gathering my purse. I think it's time for me to go. That's when I saw them, my own catering vans pulling up to the service entrance. The company Mark had hired, Golden Gate Catering, was one I'd acquired just months before in a private deal. The irony was perfect. One call to my operations manager confirmed it. Yes, chef, it's our crew. We're just starting dinner service now. The decision crystallized in that moment. If my presence was such an unwelcome intrusion, surely they wouldn't want my company providing their dinner. Pack it up, I instructed, my voice steady. All of it, now, chef. Are you sure? Completely sure. Send in the emergency cancellation team. I want everything cleared within 15 minutes. The aftermath was chaos. 300 hungry guests. No main course, no dessert. Whispers spread through the crowd as servers quietly cleared half-set tables. Dad's face turned purple when he realized what was happening. You can't do this, he roared, causing several nearby guests to jump. This is sabotage. Actually, I can, I replied calmly. Check the contract's hostile behavior clause. Section 8, Paragraph 3. My company reserves the right to terminate service in cases of harassment or hostile behavior toward staff or ownership. I smiled sweetly. You really should read the fine print. Jenny's carefully maintained composure cracked. You vindictive little. I'd be careful about what you say next, I cut in. There are plenty of witnesses here. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Mark's was the most painful. You just proved Jenny right about you. I can't believe I thought you'd changed. Do you have any idea how humiliating this was? They had to order pizza for a black tie wedding. But there were other messages too. Amy wrote, what they did to you was awful. You stood up for yourself, finally. Also, I'd love to book you for my daughter's wedding. Anyone who can execute an exit that professionally is someone I want to work with. A week later, Mark called again. His voice was different this time, softer, more like the little brother I remembered. I'm sorry, he said, the words coming out in a rush. I should have stood up for you. I've been a coward for years, watching them treat you like this. Why didn't you? I asked, the question I'd held back for years. You knew what they were doing wasn't right. Fear, I guess. Fear of rocking the boat, of losing Dad's approval, of ending up treated like you were. But watching you walk away at the wedding, I realized I've been losing my sister instead. That's worse than anything they could do to me. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. Mark and his wife began couples counseling, working on setting boundaries with Jenny and Dad. The process was messy. Jenny's attempts to sabotage my business through false reviews and employee harassment required legal intervention, but it was a movement. 3 months after the wedding, I sat across from Mark in a quiet cafe, both of us older and perhaps a little wiser. They're not going to change, he said, stirring his coffee absently. But I have. I want my kids, when we have them, to know their aunt, to know about Mom. I'd like that. Standing in my kitchen again, watching another wedding being prepped, Maria caught my eye. You okay, chef? I nodded, thinking of the latest text from Mark, asking to meet for coffee. Yeah, I am. Sometimes you have to break things to fix them properly. Jenny still tries to cause trouble, but her influence has waned. The last time she attempted to contact my staff, my lawyer sent such a strongly worded cease and desist that even she got the message. Dad occasionally sends awkward emails, usually when he's been drinking, alternating between accusations and clumsy attempts at reconciliation. I've learned to let them go unanswered. The weight of family expectations had finally lifted. I'd built something of my own, something Mom would have been proud of. The proof was all around me, in the busy kitchen, the loyal staff, the full booking calendar. And maybe, just maybe, I was rebuilding something with Mark too. Life doesn't always give you the family you want, but it gives you the strength to create your own path. Looking around at my staff, my chosen family, I knew I'd found mine. The food truck might be long gone, but its spirit lived on in every event we catered, every client we served, every bridge we built or burned. And somewhere, I like to think Mom was watching, proud of the strength she taught me, even if she couldn't be here to see it herself.
My parents made me feel worthless years ago. Now they demanded retirement money. But I'm done. I'm 30. I've built the kind of success my parents swore I'd never achieve. The kind of success that has them suddenly interested in being part of my life again. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so infuriating. They spent years telling me I was worthless, and now they want a piece of my worth. Looking back at those days right after graduation, I threw myself into finance. The hours were insane, but I discovered I had a real talent for it. I started as an entry-level analyst working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. Unlike my childhood, where hard work never seemed to pay off, this time I saw results. I got promoted faster than anyone expected. My bosses noticed my dedication, my ability to spot opportunities others missed. I started learning about real estate on the side, and that's where everything really clicked into place. By the time I hit 30, I had more money than I'd ever dreamed possible, enough to never worry about finances again. The kid they said would amount to nothing had built something substantial. You'd think they would finally give me some credit. Instead, they kept telling relatives I was still finding myself and needed to be more responsible. Responsible? I've been taking care of myself since I was a teenager. I'd built a successful career completely on my own, but nothing was ever good enough for them. They couldn't admit they were wrong about me, so they had to find new ways to dismiss my achievements. Then the calls started coming. Dad would ring me up, talking about their struggling retirement fund, how they weren't getting any younger. At first, I just nodded along, not really engaging. Then he got more direct. Families supposed to support each other. After all we've done for you, you should help us in our old age. I almost laughed out loud. All they'd done for me? Like what? Making me feel worthless and leaving me to fend for myself? The audacity of their request was stunning. When I asked what kind of help they wanted, Dad said, "It's not like we're asking for much, just a monthly contribution to make sure we can keep the lifestyle we've worked so hard for." These people, who had never supported me, who had actively worked to tear down my confidence at every turn, now wanted me to fund their retirement? It was like some sick joke. They hadn't saved anything for their future, hadn't planned at all, and now expected me to bail them out. The pressure kept building. Every call became a guilt trip. "You're our only son. It's your responsibility." Mom would sigh dramatically about all their sacrifices, as if providing basic necessities during my childhood was some extraordinary act of generosity. Then Dad sent me something that really took the cake, an actual itemized list of expenses from my childhood. Everything from meals 1990 to 2004, to utilities totaling $85,000. He even signed it like a formal invoice. That's when it really hit me. They didn't see me as their son. I was just an investment they were finally trying to cash in on. I ignored them for weeks after that. But they wouldn't let up. They started calling from different numbers, sending guilt-laden messages about family loyalty and obligation. They even got my sister Emma, their golden child, involved. She tried to play peacemaker, but she hadn't lived my life. She hadn't experienced what it was like to be constantly torn down, to never be good enough. She was the one they praised, the one who could do no wrong. Of course, she couldn't understand why I was being difficult. Growing up in my house was like living in a pressure cooker where the release valve was broken. My parents had this perfect image of what their son should be: straight A's, varsity athlete, future doctor, or a lawyer. I wasn't any of those things. Every single day, they made sure I knew just how much I was failing to live up to their expectations. It was a constant barrage of criticism and disappointment that wore me down bit by bit. High school was especially brutal. Any grade less than an A meant another lecture from my dad. "I'm not raising a failure here. Shape up, or you'll end up a loser." Mom wasn't any better. She'd throw around threats like, "Maybe you need to learn what the real world is really like." The real kicker? While they had all these grand expectations, they never actually helped me achieve them. Not once did they offer support or guidance. Just criticism and disappointment, served up daily like some twisted form of motivation. I started working when I was 16, just to buy the basics: school supplies, clothes, things most kids get from their parents without thinking twice. I remember the first job I got, stocking shelves at the local grocery store. My parents acted like I was doing it just to rebel against them, to show how independent I was. They couldn't understand that I had to work because they wouldn't help with even the most basic necessities. When college applications rolled around, they dropped their biggest bomb yet, they wouldn't help pay. "You've already wasted enough of our money," Dad said with that dismissive shrug I grew to hate. "Figure it out yourself." So I did exactly that. I worked my way through college, juggling classes with multiple part-time jobs, surviving on minimal sleep and zero social life. I missed out on all the typical college experiences, the parties, the spring breaks, the late-night study groups with friends. Instead, I was working double shifts at a local diner, trying to make enough to cover my next semester's books. When I graduated, not a single family member showed up to watch me walk across that stage. They didn't even call. By then, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. I knew I was on my own, and maybe that was the greatest gift they ever gave me, even if they didn't mean to. Anyway, getting back to what happened, everything came to a head last Thanksgiving. I showed up hoping we could have an adult conversation about boundaries and respect. Instead, Dad launched into another speech about family unity and doing your part. My mother sat there nodding along, occasionally throwing in comments about how children owe their parents for raising them. Finally, after years of taking their abuse, I'd had enough. "I'm not funding your retirement," I told them point blank. "I succeeded despite you, not because of you. You spent my entire life making me feel worthless, and now you want to cash in on my success? That's not happening." I could see the shock on their faces. They weren't used to me standing up for myself. Mom started crying, but I wasn't buying it anymore. These weren't tears of regret. They were tears of frustration that their plan was falling apart. Dad exploded, ranting about respect and how money had made me selfish. The irony of him calling me selfish was almost too much to bear. This from the man who wouldn't even buy his son school supplies. "Respect isn't demanded, it's earned," I told him, looking him straight in the eye. "And you've done nothing to earn mine. You spent my whole life treating me like I was nothing. Now that I've proven you wrong, you want to pretend we're one big happy family? That's not how this works." I could see my words hitting home, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of understanding, I saw only anger and indignation. Dad's face turned red with rage. He pointed at the door and screamed for me to get out of his house. It was the same old pattern. When he couldn't control the situation, he resorted to anger and threats. But this time it didn't work. I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I grabbed my jacket, looked at Mom one last time, and said, "I hope someday you realize what you've done. But I'm done trying to fix things with you." The aftermath was messy, as you might expect. They went on a smear campaign, telling everyone who would listen about their ungrateful son who abandoned them in their time of need. They twisted every detail, painting themselves as victims and me as the villain. I lost contact with a lot of family members and old friends who bought into their version of events. But for the first time in my life, I had peace. That was worth more than any relationship built on manipulation and guilt. I focused on building my own life, growing my investments, traveling, making real friendships with people who actually cared about me as a person, not what I could give them. I started therapy, working through the years of emotional abuse and neglect. Slowly, I began to understand that their treatment of me was never about my worth. It was about their own issues and inadequacies. Emma still keeps in touch, though carefully. She asked me once if I regretted cutting them off. "I regret not having parents who could love me for who I am," I told her honestly. "I feel bad for the kid I was who just wanted their approval. But I don't regret finally standing up for myself and walking away." She didn't fully understand, but I could see she was trying to. These days, I hear they're struggling financially, reaching out to distant relatives for help. But that's not my problem anymore. They had decades to build their own life and save for retirement. They made their choices, just like I made mine. Their failure to plan doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. Sometimes people ask if I would help them if things got really bad. The answer is still no. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I won't let them think they can spend decades hurting me, then come around for a handout just because we share DNA. Family is more than blood. It's about love, respect, and support, none of which they ever gave me. They didn't act like parents when I needed them. They don't get to claim parental privileges now that they need me. I'm free now, free from their expectations, their disappointment, their manipulation. I know my worth, and I'm never going back to feeling like I'm not enough. If they ever truly take responsibility and offer a genuine apology, maybe things could be different. But I'm not holding my breath. I built this life without their approval or help, and I'll keep living it that way. Their opinion of me no longer matters. I've finally learned to value myself, and that's something they can never take away from me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My parents funded my spoiled brother's stolen business idea. Then, they even sent a little spy to keep tab on me. I'm 28. I never imagined my life could spiral so completely in such a short span of time. My parents, my brother, and the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, each of them betrayed me in ways that left scars I'll carry forever. What started as a dream of building my own business turned into a nightmare of family favoritism, deceit, and heartbreak. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed, too blinded by trust and love to recognize the manipulation happening right in front of me. A year ago, I decided to quit my job in real estate to pursue my lifelong dream of starting my own business. My vision was clear: an innovative real estate investment firm that would revolutionize how people approach property development in our rapidly growing city. I'd worked tirelessly for 5 years, saving every penny I could. But I knew having investors with experience would be invaluable, especially in the competitive market I was entering. My parents were the natural choice. My dad ran a successful car dealership with his uncle, and my mom handled all the accounting. I was confident they'd see the potential in my plan. That Sunday dinner started like any other. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and we were all gathered around the table when I decided to make my pitch. I've been working on something. I began pulling out my carefully prepared business plan, a new approach to real estate investment that I think could really take off. My parents listened intently as I laid out my vision. Dad asked thoughtful questions about market analysis and profit projections, while Mom took notes. For a moment, I really thought I had their backing. Then my younger brother Louis, who had never shown the slightest interest in entrepreneurship, cleared his throat. Actually, he said with that smirk I'd grown to hate, "You've inspired me, bro. I've been thinking about starting a business too." The business he described was suspiciously similar to mine, just with a few surface-level changes. My stomach turned as I watched my parents' faces light up at his words. 2 weeks later, they delivered the news over coffee in their kitchen. "We've given it a lot of thought," Dad began, not quite meeting my eyes. "We can only invest in one of you, and we think Louis has more business acumen." I nearly choked. More business acumen? He's been in sales for what, 2 years? I've been in real estate since college. "Don't be dramatic," Mom sighed. "We just think his approach is more practical." Then Louis, ever the gracious winner, offered his solution. "Hey, you could always work for me as a junior partner," he said, patting my shoulder. "Just so you'll have something." Something in me snapped. "You couldn't come up with your own idea if your life depended on it," I spat. "You're just riding my coattails like you always have." The argument escalated quickly, with Louis playing the victim and my parents trying to mediate. "We love you both equally," they insisted, but their actions spoke louder than words. I walked out that night and didn't look back. For 6 months, I stuck to my guns. No family gatherings, no response to their messages, nothing. Every time Mom tried to guilt me into coming home, every time Dad sent those passive-aggressive texts about family loyalty, I reminded myself of their betrayal and stayed strong. I focused entirely on building my business from scratch. It was harder without their backing, but gradually, through determination and my savings, I started seeing progress. I landed a few small development projects, built relationships with independent investors, and slowly began making a name for myself. Then I met Courtney. It was at a real estate networking event. She was representing a local investment firm, and we clicked immediately. Smart, ambitious, and seemingly understanding of my situation with my family. Family business can be toxic, she said during our first date, touching my hand sympathetically. My dad tried to control my career too. That's why I struck out on my own. She was everything I needed at that moment, supportive, understanding, and seemingly in my corner. When I vented about my family's betrayal, she'd listen with sympathy and righteous anger on my behalf. "You're going to prove them all wrong," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "And I'll be right here beside you." I fell hard. For the first time since the family blow-up, I felt like someone was truly on my side. Courtney became my rock, my confidant, my partner in every sense of the word. She'd help me review contracts late into the night, offer suggestions on deals, and celebrate every small victory with genuine enthusiasm. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. We planned a romantic weekend getaway at a cozy bed and breakfast upstate. After months of growing success in my business and deepening love with Courtney, I felt ready to take the next step. The engagement ring was hidden in my suitcase, a vintage piece I'd spent months searching for because Courtney had mentioned loving her grandmother's antique jewelry. That Friday evening, while Courtney was in the shower, I couldn't find my phone to check the reservation time for dinner. I grabbed hers instead, and that's when I saw it, a text from my dad. My heart stopped. The preview simply read, "Updates for today?" But it was enough to make my blood run cold. Why would she be texting him? Breaking our no snooping rule, I opened the message thread. What I found made me physically ill. Hundreds of messages, spanning months. Photos of my confidential business documents, detailed reports about my meetings with investors, even screenshots of my private emails. "Meeting with Carson Group tomorrow." One of her texts read, "Sending you the details now. They're looking to invest $2 million if the numbers check out." "Good work," my father replied. "The usual amount has been transferred. Lewis will adjust his pitch accordingly." My hands shaking, I dug deeper. There were separate message threads with both my mother and Lewis. The betrayal went deeper than I could have imagined. "He's still suspicious about running into you at that coffee shop," Courtney had written to Lewis. "Maybe we should cool it with the accidental meetings for a while. Just keep him distracted," Lewis replied. "Dad's lawyers are almost done replicating his business model. We need to stay one step ahead. Once we launch first, his client base will come to us naturally." The timestamps told the story. They'd approached her shortly after Lewis had stolen my business plan. Everything about our relationship had been orchestrated, from our chance meeting at the networking event to her carefully crafted background story about family business struggles. But what made me nauseated was the casual way they discussed manipulating me. "Lewis. Does he still talk in his sleep? Any useful info there?" "Courtney. Nothing business related, but he misses Mom. Might be able to use that." "Lewis. Perfect. Mom's been wanting to reach out anyway. Time it with his next big deal." I heard the shower turn off and quickly put her phone back. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. While she was still in the bathroom, I packed my bags silently and slipped out of my car. 2 hours later, pulled over at a gas station, I watched her frantic text roll in. "Baby, where are you? I'm worried sick. Please come back. We can talk about whatever's wrong. I love you. Please don't do this." Each message made me angrier, knowing now how calculated each word was. But then, staring at the stream of fake concern, an idea formed. Instead of letting them win, why not turn the tables? I drove back to the B&B, apologizing for my anxiety attack and claiming I just needed some air. That night, I got down on one knee and proposed, watching her eyes fill with what I now knew were crocodile tears as she said yes. Over the next week, I became the perfect fiancé while secretly building my case. I hired a private investigator who uncovered a trail of payments from my family to Courtney's offshore account. My lawyer helped me document every piece of stolen information and its subsequent use in my brother's business. I planned an engagement party at the most expensive restaurant in town, insisting on inviting both families and all our friends. I think it's time to make peace with your family, I told Courtney. Let's invite everyone to celebrate with us. She was thrilled, of course. Perfect opportunity to report back to her real employers. The night of the party, I waited until everyone had arrived. The restaurant's private room was packed with her friends, my former friends, and of course, my family. The champagne was flowing, and Courtney was playing her role perfectly, hanging on my arm and beaming at everyone. I stood up to make a toast, gently tapping my glass with a spoon. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I began, my voice steady, especially my beautiful fiancé and my loving family. You've all been so supportive. I paused, meeting Courtney's eyes. In fact, let me show you just how supportive they've been. The waiters I'd hired began distributing folders to every guest. Inside were screenshots of all their schemes, the texts, the payments, the stolen documents, everything. My fiancé has been spying on me for my family, I announced to the silent room. Every business secret, every personal moment, all sold to the highest bidder. And the best part? I turned to Lewis. She was working with my brother the whole time. The room erupted in chaos. Courtney ran out crying. My mother started shouting about family loyalty, and Lewis tried to approach me aggressively until security stepped in. How dare you embarrass us like this? My father bellowed. Embarrass you? I laughed. You're worried about embarrassment after what you did? Oh, and one more thing, I added over the commotion. I'll be seeing you all in court. Corporate espionage is a serious crime. Later that night, Courtney came to collect her things from my apartment. She looked different somehow, smaller, less polished, more desperate. Please, she begged. Let me explain. Your family. They approached me when I was desperate. My sister's medical bills. Save it, I cut her off. I saw all the messages, Courtney. The planning, the manipulation, everything. You had countless chances to come clean. Instead, you chose to keep betraying me day after day. I never meant to hurt you, she sobbed. It just spiraled out of control. And then I really did fall in love with you. Love? I scoffed. You don't even know what that word means. Get out of my house. My lawyer will contact you about the lawsuit. That was 3 months ago. The lawsuit is proceeding well. Turns out courts take a pretty dim view of corporate espionage and fraud. My brother's business is crumbling now that investors know how he obtained his innovative ideas. My parents have tried repeatedly to reach out, alternating between threats and pleas for reconciliation. I've gone completely no contact with all of them. My business is growing steadily, built on my own terms this time. The betrayal still hurts, some days more than others, but therapy is helping me process it all. Last week, I ran into Mike, my old colleague from the real estate firm. I heard what happened, he said. Man, I'm sorry. I knew something was off about your family's reaction, but I never imagined. Me neither, I admitted. But you know what? In a weird way, they did me a favor. I know now that I can succeed without them. More importantly, I know I'm better off without their toxicity in my life. I've learned that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. These days, I'm focused on building a future free from toxic relationships, and this time, I'm doing it alone. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most important truths. Not everyone who claims to support you truly does, and sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself. As for me, I'm choosing myself this time. And you know what? That's more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one. My parents cut me off when I refused to ditch college for my lazy brother. So, I left for good. I'm 20 in my second year of college and actually loving my major, which still surprises me sometimes. But while I'm living the campus life, there's this whole other world back home that keeps trying to pull me back in. My parents run this small shop in town. It's not fancy, but it kept food on our table and paid for the roof over our heads. Mom and dad have poured their lives into that place, working crazy hours, missing holidays, the whole deal. And they've never been shy about dropping hints about their dream of me taking over someday. More like their dream, definitely not mine. Then there's my younger brother, Steven. He's 18 now, but I swear this kid has been living on easy street since day one. Everyone in the family calls him the golden child, and they're not even trying to be ironic about it. It was like watching two different sets of rules growing up. I'd be sweating over a mop in the shop while Steven was sprawled on the couch playing video games. He'd get the latest iPhone for passing a math test, while I had to save up for months just to buy a basic laptop for school. If he messed up, just a shrug and a boys will be boys from dad. If I did, well, let's just say the lecture would last for days. Every time I tried to point out this obvious double standard, Dad would give me this rehearsed speech about how Steven needs extra support to build his confidence, or some other excuse that made zero sense. I eventually learned to just keep my mouth shut and focus on my grades, my ticket out as far as I was concerned. But this past semester, that's when everything went sideways, and all this family drama I'd been trying to ignore came crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. One night, I came home from college for a weekend visit, expecting a normal family dinner. Instead, my parents called me into the living room with serious faces. Steven sat off to the side, fiddling with his phone as if bored by the entire scenario. My mother cleared her throat. "We've decided it's time you step up at the family shop. We want you to drop out of college." I blinked, thinking it was some twisted joke. But my father cut in. "Your brother will be helping, well, eventually. But he's not ready yet. We need someone reliable right now." Stunned, I asked why they'd want me, who's on track with decent grades, to abandon school. My mother explained Steven wasn't motivated and needed more free time to figure himself out. Meanwhile, the shop was understaffed, and they refused to hire more workers. They believed it was my duty as the eldest to sacrifice for the family. I pushed back, reminding them I was only halfway through my degree, that I had career goals beyond the shop. My father dismissed that with a wave. "Our family business is more important. You can go back to school in a few years, maybe." A pit formed in my stomach. I'd worked hard to get into college, paying part of my tuition with scholarships and part from my parents' help. The idea of tossing it all away so Steven could lounge around was surreal. My father's tone grew sharp. "We're done discussing. Either you come help the shop full-time, or you'll be on your own." I locked eyes with my mother, hoping for any sign of softness. She just nodded at my father's words. Steven smirked, as if smugly amused. It was like they'd all choreographed this confrontation. I took a breath and calmly said, "I'm not quitting college." My father's face hardened. My mother tried guilt-tripping me. "We sacrificed so much for your education already. Now it's your turn." She peppered in how the shop had always been the family's livelihood, how they expected me to pick up the baton. None of it swayed me. I repeated, "I won't drop out." My father's eyes blazed. "Then we're cutting you off," he snapped. "No more tuition money. No more living expenses. Figure it out if you insist on defying us." My world reeled. They knew I couldn't easily pay the rest of my college fees on my own. But I swallowed my fear. This was too big a demand to roll over and comply. "Fine," I managed to say, voice trembling. Then I stood up and left the house, ignoring Steven's smug chuckle. I spent the night at a friend's place, mind racing, trying to figure out how I'd salvage my education without parental support. Even then, I had no inkling just how badly they'd escalate things, or that I'd end up cutting them out of my life altogether. The next morning, I woke up groggy on my friend's couch. My phone buzzed with messages from my parents. My father's texts were curt, were serious. "If you don't comply, you're on your own." My mother wrote, "We did everything for you. Why can't you help us now? Your brother needs freedom to discover himself." Steven remained silent. He rarely ever texted me, probably too busy enjoying his new gaming console or something else my parents had bought him. Trepidation swelled in me. I needed a plan, some way to cover my tuition. The initial deposit for this semester was already paid, but the next ones wouldn't be. I also had rent for my small off-campus place, which until now my parents partially covered. My job as a part-time waiter barely handled groceries and textbooks. Could I take extra shifts? Could I get a student loan? My mind spun with possibilities. That same day, I decided to head back home to gather my stuff. If my parents were serious about cutting me off, I wasn't sure I'd be welcome to stay there. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. My mother asked if I'd come to my census. I gently but firmly repeated that I wouldn't drop out. She frowned, brandishing the shop's ledger, as if that would persuade me. Look, we're short-staffed. Your father and I can't handle it alone. Your brother? Well, you know he's not reliable. I asked, why not hire help? She threw up her hands like I was clueless, mumbling about finances. It was bizarre. They could pay me if they wanted, so paying an outsider should be no different. Unless they expected me to work for peanuts. My father marched in, face flushed, pointing an accusing finger. You owe us, boy. We raised you, paid for you. Now it's your turn. He rattled off how I'd used up countless resources. But I'd never asked them to run the shop that way, or to spoil my brother. That was their choice, and it didn't justify me torpedoing my future. At that moment, Stephen sauntered out of his bedroom, ears hooked by earphones. He smirked. So are you going to do the right thing and drop out or what? The sheer arrogance stung. I fired back. Why don't you step up if the shop need help? He rolled his eyes. I'm not cut out for grunt work. I have bigger dreams. The hypocrisy reeked. He was older than me by only 2 years, yet they babed him as though he was helpless. Sick of the hostility, I began grabbing my clothes, my laptop, whatever essentials I could find. My mother hovered, tears welling up, calling me ungrateful. My father cursed under his breath about how I'd see sense eventually. As I stuffed things into a duffel, my father hissed, "If you leave now, don't bother coming back. We're done paying for anything. That includes your phone plan, your rent, everything." I paused, heart pounding, but mustered my determination. "I'll figure it out," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Then, with one last glare from my father and a triumphant grin from Stephen, I lugged my bags to my car and drove off. No longer having a place to call home, I crashed at a friend's place temporarily. My parents canceled my phone line the next day, as promised. I quickly switched to a cheap prepaid plan. My bank account saw a flurry of reverse payments for rent. My mother apparently had all my auto-pay details. I scrambled to change everything. The bleak reality, I was truly on my own, with minimal savings, half a semester of tuition still due, and no family support. Panic set in, but it also lit a fire under me. I visited my college's financial aid office, explained my predicament. An advisor was sympathetic, suggesting I apply for an emergency scholarship or a small personal loan. It wouldn't fully cover everything, but it might bridge the gap. I also asked my manager at the restaurant if I could pick up more shifts. He hesitated, but eventually gave me a few additional hours. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a lifeline. Amid this chaos, texts from my parents trickled in through social media since my phone number changed. My father ranted, "We still expect you to come to your census. The offer stands, drop out, come help the shop, and we'll fix everything." My mother wrote guilt-laced messages about tearing the family apart. She insisted Stephen was fragile and needed me to carry the load. None of it swayed me. Instead, I started to realize how much they'd coddled him for years, expecting me to fill in the gaps. Stephen made a single cameo message, mocking me for playing the victim and calling me foolish for refusing an easy path. Easy path. He was the one refusing to lift a finger to help the family business. The hypocrisy was astounding. Over time, I discovered a few extended family members had heard a twisted version of events. My father told them I'd abandoned the family shop to chase a useless degree, leaving them in dire straits. Some aunts and uncles scolded me, telling me to be more responsible, to do the right thing. I tried explaining that my parents wanted me to bail out my lazy brother so he could stay carefree. Some believed me, others didn't. The stress was immense. But I pressed on. Juggling classes, extra work shifts, and managing finances was brutal, yet also liberating in a strange sense. For the first time, I felt in control of my own destiny. No father barking orders, no mother guilt tripping me to coddle Stephen. Though physically and mentally exhausted, I sensed a new independence blossoming. As the semester wore on, I got word from a friend who sometimes visited the family shop. Apparently, Stephen barely showed up. My parents were frantically doing all the grunt work themselves, complaining about how someone had betrayed them. My friend said the atmosphere there was sour, customers noticing the tension. I felt a flicker of pity. My parents were stuck, but they'd created this mess. They'd pinned all their hopes on me abandoning my dreams. Now the business was floundering, thanks to their golden child's refusal to step up. Meanwhile, I hammered away at my studies, determined to prove I could do this without them. My landlord was surprisingly understanding when I explained I'd pay rent a bit late, thanks to the change situation. I kept my head low, avoided drama, and kept focusing on the next day's tasks, finishing essays, memorizing recipes for the restaurant's daily special. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I'd lie awake, anger surging about how my parents had turned on me so quickly. But each day also strengthened my resolve. I refused to buckle under their manipulative demands. Gradually, I built a new routine. My friend's couch turned into a short-term stay. Then another friend offered a room to rent cheaply. I scraped enough money to cover the deposit. Step by step, I was forging a path independent of my family. And though the scars of betrayal lingered, a part of me felt proud. Near the end of that semester, I received a surprise call from my mother, using an unfamiliar number. I hesitated but answered. She sounded weary, no longer confrontational, but still laced with guilt trips. She admitted the shop was struggling, that Stephen never pulled his weight, and they were close to going under. She pleaded for me to come back, not with an apology, but with a rehashed argument. He's your brother. You have to help him. She glossed over how they'd abandoned my education, cut my finances. Instead, she tried painting me as the savior again. This is your chance to make amends, she said, as though I was the one who'd wronged them. I exhaled, anger stirring. You forced me out, canceled my support, tried to make me drop out. Now that your golden child isn't stepping up, you want me to fix everything. She stammered about family loyalty tradition, how I owed them for raising me. I felt a pang of sorrow for her, but the betrayal was too deep to ignore. I told her calmly, I wasn't returning to the shop or the household. I'm finishing my degree, paying my own way. I'm done being your fallback plan. She cried, calling me ungrateful. My father's voice came on speaker, accusing me of destroying the family. He repeated the same lines from months ago. Come home, help the shop, or we'll never speak again. I realized with clarity that they'd never apologize or admit wrongdoing. They just wanted a sacrificial lamb to keep the business afloat. I ended the call, letting their words hang in the air. That night, I made the decision to go fully no contact. I blocked their numbers, removed them on social media, and informed any meddling relatives that I wasn't open to further discussion. It felt drastic, but each new contact with them only reopened wounds. I had no illusions that they'd cease sense soon. Maybe they never would. Since then, I've maintained my coursework, kept up with my job, and though it's a grind, I'm on track to graduate. Without the constant emotional burden of my parents' demands, I'm actually thriving academically. Sometimes I hear from mutual acquaintances at the shops on the brink of closing that Stephen flaked out entirely, maybe got bored. While I don't relish seeing my parents' livelihood fail, I also don't regret standing my ground. They pinned everything on me dropping out, ignoring that I have my own ambitions and future. It stings to recall how quickly they turned on me when I refused to be their stopgap. But in a strange way, I'm grateful for the clarity. I learned that unconditional family love for them was contingent on blind obedience. Once I set my own path, they withdrew support, manipulative and harsh. So I cut them off financially, emotionally, and physically. It was the only way to protect myself from their manipulative demands. There are lonely moments, yes, but the sense of self-respect is worth it. I share this now because maybe someone else is facing a similar ultimatum from entitled relatives. Standing firm might be painful. You might lose financial support or face guilt trips. But if you truly believe in your goals, you can find a path on your own. My parents wanted me to sacrifice my future for their golden child. I refused, moved out, and went no contact. No regrets. I'll finish my degree, keep my dignity, and forge a life that's truly mine, free from their controlling grip. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.